true form.
When the Persona 5 teaser came out in 2014, I retained my excitement with cautious optimism. This game was much too far out, so I actively avoided reading too much into it. If you know the games industry, you know that the game's direction and voice can change over long periods of time, may it be for better or for worse. It is until years later, after I had finished the game, that I started to see how my experiences line up with Persona 5's original design philosophy. In a 2014 Famitsu interview translated by Pepsi Man, Peace Studio director Katsura Hashino shared more on the teaser image. And I quote, "I feel that in today's world, there is no shortage of people that are bored and discontent with their lives. They're at a dead end, chained down to a world which they resent being a part. Persona 5, in that sense, is a game about freedom, the kind that these sorts of people haven't had living in the real world. I want them to attain that sensation by playing through the game." With regards to the shackles in the image, Hashino explained that they naturally represent the idea of a person's immobility, of being unable to move ahead from their current position in life. Persona 5 works as an analogy to media and the modern society.
I am the pillager of Twilight.
After recently completing my first run, I noticed there is a ubiquitous attempt to drive Hashino's thematic philosophy home in a number of design choices. From the main characters being outcasts to society, the confidants struggling with what the world throws at them, the transitional expositions of society, to the color design choices, all of this set to the backdrop of modern Tokyo and Shoji Meguro's track that ground these stories. I will try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but just be aware I do divulge into the first few hours of the game, some plot details. If you want to avoid it, I recommend that you probably should check this video out another time. You see, what I'm aiming here isn't a review per se. This video is more so an anecdote of my ideas while playing Persona 5. During my time, I didn't have any conception as to what the game's central themes were about, and it took me a few hours in to really process what the game was trying to tell me. I didn't think about it initially because the mere fact of playing a Persona game already had me enthralled. It was after the first palace boss with Kamoshida where Persona 5's central themes really became compelling to me beyond the Phantom Thief's motivation. The game essentially starts with you coming to school with a criminal record, and you learn about the school's abusive volleyball coach, Kamoshida. This man is not a good person. You enter his cognitive space, the game's dungeon space. You explore the subconscious inner perspective of how Kamoshida views the school, his role, and everyone else's at the school. As a Phantom Thief, you steal his desire, that spark, that trigger, that internal treasure that inhibits the motivations of the villain. After I defeated Kamoshida, the scumbag entered a state of panic. His will shattered right in front of my character, and he looked remorseful. Kamoshida seemed angry at the world, and that had something to do with the expectations placed on him. He certainly felt like a victim in all this. That was strange to me. How can someone who uses his position of power to exploit people feel like a victim? It took me a moment and I thought to myself, interesting. Soon, other villains with their own palaces began to have their own reasons for their actions. Reasons that made me stop and think about what sort of experiences adulthood could drive a person in this direction. Yes, Kamoshida, Kaneshiro, Madarame, all bad people. And yet, I couldn't help but question if it is even in my place to be changing people's hearts. I'm playing a role of a high school student, growing up in the world completely unaware of what society may throw at me down the line. How would I truly know if I'm just as righteous when I become an adult? Would I myself be able to make morally right choices if I'm thrust into a similar situation? Are these men truly the real evil that I'm dealing with? Now, if you think I'm crazy for sympathizing with these villains, I'm not. Again, I'm not saying they should be forgiven. On the contrary, they should be punished accordingly. From a narrative, sociological, and psychological aspect, I just think it's interesting. To provide additional context to my line of thinking, I'm reminded of this book called Free Will by neurologist Sam Harris. In a passage, he explains that who we are, the life we live, and where we're raised, how society molds you completely decides the sort of decisions you will make. He said, take a moment to think about the context in which your next decision will occur. You did not pick your parents or the time and place of your birth. You didn't choose your gender or most of your life experiences. You had no control whatsoever over the genome or the development of your brain, and how your brain is making choices on the basis of your preferences and beliefs hammered into you over a lifetime. Where is freedom in this? Yes, you are free to do what you want even now, but where did your desires come from? As a Phantom Thief, you and your comrades work to punish the adults in society, the bad adults of society, the system that betrayed you, the player. Yet in a way, these villains such as Kamoshida and Madarame found that the only way to function in this very society is to skirt against it and to adapt, to go against these very rules set by authority, to defy social morality. Perhaps Madarame was a passionate artist at one point, but found that pure love for the craft wasn't enough to put a roof over his head. Society rejected his art, so he found that the only way to continue with it is through exploitation and cruel, unconventional means. Kamoshida lived his life with high expectations placed on him by society, by the world. He is angry at the fact that he got so little of return and reward while meeting the expectations of everyone around him. Perhaps these expectations to win is more deeply rooted than you're led on to believe. I see the treasures as a source of love for their respective craft, a source of validation that this is what they're supposed to do for the rest of their lives. Over time, society warps their perspective and means of it. The Phantom Thieves and these bad adults at the core have a problem with society. And there's a level of parallel, a level of ambiguity here worth mentioning. As a member of the Phantom Thieves, my character will walk into this very world I'm seeking to punish. Will I survive in it and fare any better?
Game over. They were too weak to bother with.
Of course, maybe none of what I see would make sense if I didn't offer one more perspective to Persona 5's themes. It's this: society draws a line. Either you blend in like the rest of the faceless caricatures you see out in the streets of Tokyo, or be punished and treated like an outcast. I won't go too into it in case of spoilers, but this distinction is further cemented when you reach the last hours of Persona 5. Hopefully when you get to that point, or when you're already at that point, you'll see what I mean. With each palace you complete, as a high school character, you're left with vignettes of what adulthood would look like in society, and the kind of world you will find yourself in after high school. Will you become another faceless adult in the crowd, or will you rise only to be an outcast if you have a strong desire to want more out of life? It's a lose-lose situation. It's this very dilemma that I found to be truly captivating during my playthrough. I don't think Persona 5 straight up tells you what that freedom is, but rather opts for a more metaphorical one. However, Persona 5 never needs to tell you directly. When Hashino was asked about what makes a good RPG, he answered with this: I think the greatest joy for many fans is finding a title that not only provides short-term fun, but stays in their hearts for years after. My goal is to create games that affect the players' real lives in some way, but that sort of change can't be forced upon them by the creators. It comes from being personally affected by the game, by experiencing a fictional situation through the eyes of a character. You can step back and evaluate your own life in the real world. It's all about empathy, immersion, excitement. 3 things that games can provide better than any other form of entertainment. So, what do I think is Persona 5's definition of freedom? Well, you actively play this out, and believe it or not, you're actually living it. The answer lies in the creative inputs you instill day to day. You build meaningful relationships, you fall in love, you build confidence, you study, you work out, you read, explore new places, work a day job, go to school, you try cooking, experience loss, you laugh with friends. Everything you do transforms your life and equips you into an unforgiving society. Going back to the book Free Will, Harris explains it best: there is no telling how much I might change in the future. Just as one wouldn't draw a lasting conclusion about oneself on the basis of brief experience of indigestion, One needn't do so on basis of how one was taught or behaved for vast stretches of time in the past. A creative change of inputs to the system, learning new skills, forming new relationships, adopting new habits of attention may radically transform one's life. Becoming sensitive to the background causes of one's thoughts and feelings can, paradoxically, allow for greater creative control over one's life. This understanding reveals you to be a biochemical puppet, of course, but it allows you to grab hold of one of your strings. Persona at its heart is a coming-of-age player experience. You arrive much closer to your version of freedom and justice the more you simply, experience. You can't break the chains of society alone, and hopefully with your experiences, with your relationships, with the support systems you've built, you might just obtain the freedom to live with your refined desire.